accident. The money comes from a homeowner sued for allegedly allowing teenagers to drink in her home.
November 19th, 2006. This is the aftermath of an afternoon of drinking by a handful of North Suburban teenagers. George Baldwin was 19 at the time. He was dating a 16-year-old girl who lives in this Lake Forest home. Together with a few friends, police say the teens gathered in an upstairs bedroom and began downing beers. The girl's mother, Laura Lee Pfeiffer, contends she had no idea the teens were drinking. When the girl's father came home and discovered it, he ordered the boys to leave. A few miles later, this. Spinal cord damage left George Baldwin paralyzed, likely for life. Although he was 19 at the time and legally an adult, his attorney successfully argued that George's former girlfriend's mom had a duty to prevent the other minor children at home from drinking, and not doing so led to the accident.
The message is very clear that the public policy in Illinois is going towards zero tolerance. That there's zero tolerance, parents should have zero tolerance in allowing underage drinking to occur at their home.
The parents in this case have lost one $2.5 million civil case and are facing another.
Now this is mentioned, this is out of Illinois, but you know, I mentioned the notion of going after the particular homeowner, and the next slide just shows you, this is essentially what the attorney said. Look, they got $2.5 million out of their insurance. They certainly could if they wanted to pursue further assets. They decided not to. I think at the time there is still a particular matter of trying to recover another $33 million from the driver. The next slide is just from back to Massachusetts. If we get back to Trooper Engelhardt, I asked you to keep in mind that picture of her sitting in the courtroom at Mr. Steneen's criminal conviction. If we bring a civil action on behalf of that trooper, and one has been brought, we not being my firm, but one has been brought. If you can imagine, if you are a juror sitting there, one of 12, for several days, and Trooper Engelhardt in that particular courtroom every single day, if you can imagine the amount of expenses that Trooper Engelhardt is going to have for the rest of her life, just health care alone, the particular verdict could be astronomical. So again, it's things to think about. We look at, there is the particular lawsuit. One of the reasons the property is being sued as well is because Mr. Steneen was driving a company vehicle at the time. So, you know, say what you will about lawyers, and we've certainly heard, you know, our fair share. But a lawyer, a good plaintiff's lawyer, is going to try to find as many possible assets in order to try to recover for his or her client. If that means the homeowner, if that means the homeowner's vacation home, if that means the homeowner who's got a nice piece of property on Martha's Vineyard or on Nantucket, so be it. That's particular assets that a plaintiff's lawyer is going to look to try to recover for his or her client. I want to go back and kind of wrap up quickly here with Taylor Meyer. October 17th was the date of her death, and if you remember in the beginning, one of the reporter says the students here have learned quite a lesson from Taylor's death, and they had their candlelight vigil, and they were talking about how we didn't think it could ever happen here. But if we go through the next couple slides, basically what we've done here is that's her date of her accident. There was a party, you know, a couple weeks later that was broken up. Then 3 weeks later, the police raided this particular place back out in Norfolk. A lot of the same students that were at Taylor's party were found back out here. This one was about 5 weeks later at this particular house here, and what is interesting is if you go forward, one of the cars that was in the driveway at the time had this particular message written to the young lady, and she was at the house party drinking. Again, these are, you know, students that are saying, you know, they've learned a lesson from all of this. If we continue to go forward, this is Taylor Meyer's mother. She has become quite an advocate for teenage drinking. And one of the things that I find this particular picture somewhat moving. If you just go back just for a quick sec, Bob. If we can, thank you. You know, very often times that you've got those bracelets, the Live Strong ones, and you know all the various ones. Well, these students following Taylor's death all went and got pink bracelets in her memory. And so, following that particular house party that we just saw, where it had the car with the words written on the back of it, Taylor's mom went down. This is out of Rentham District Court, and as each one of the students came in for their particular arraignment, the mother took from them each one of those pink bracelets. She made the kids take them off because she was saying, look, you know, you're not doing any justice to the memory of my daughter. You haven't learned anything. So Miss Meyer now goes out and actually speaks about this particular, the chief had mentioned, you know, listening to a parent having to bury a child. She makes a very moving presentation, and I found that picture to be pretty powerful. But you know, unfortunately, it didn't seem to end there. Following the arraignment, we go forward in time a little bit. Another house party in Rentham. Again, many of the same kids that were at the first party with Taylor, and as a result of this particular party, we had a motor vehicle accident. No one, fortunately, was killed. But if you take a peek earlier, right there on the back of this particular truck is the sticker TM for Taylor. All right, so this person, again with the pink, put it on the back of his truck and then was involved in OUI. And if you go forward to the next one, this is the particular individual that was driving the car at the time. And one more interesting note about him just forward, this is the same young man that actually took Taylor to the prom. So it's one of those, the kids in the beginning that we show are, you know, we've learned a valuable lesson, and here they are still doing this. One more, we've got, I think someone had mentioned breathalyzers at proms, and if we go forward, I just want to show, I think I've got another video of a recent Why must I be a teenager in love? I cried a tear for nobody but you, and I'll be alone.
Miss Courtney Faisal and Mr. John Caruso.
You just saw as I mentioned, Mr. John Caruso. Following that particular prom at Saugus High School, where there was a breathalyzer and whatnot, Mr. Caruso, in the morning following the prom, struck two pedestrians. One was a mother and one was her daughter, and they were out walking the dog in the morning. And recently was found, this one says charged, but he was actually found guilty. He pled guilty, to operating under the influence and transporting alcohol. He is currently, he was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail and is currently serving 6 months. We mentioned this one. Go to the next, there it is. These are, and I don't know if you remember this story, but it was, again, following the prom, it was a mother and, you know, an elderly mother and her daughter. And when he was sentenced to 6 months, just recently, as a matter of fact, I think the family was at the court, just the outrage that they were expressing at this particular six-month sentence. So if you go to the next, this is his date from the prom.
Not a monster. Everybody's making him out to be a monster. This could have happened to anybody. 80% of the kids who went to prom went out right after. It just happened to be Johnny who ended up hitting somebody. And it's a sin, but it happens. It's real life, you know?
Honestly, it was my first prom. He brought me to my first prom. And I had the best time of my life. And it was just such a sin, and it ended like that. I would never expect that.
And then ironically, if you go to the next one, you play it here.
Ironically, Caruso had taken part in this mock drunk driving accident 2 weeks ago, aimed at teaching kids bad decisions on prom night can lead to disaster. Joe Toludo played the role of the drunk driver.
I got arrested. They brought me in. They filmed everything, and I was just like, wow, like, I'm just trying to act this, but imagine if this actually happened, then a week later, my good friend Johnny made a big mistake.
Again, it's ironic that this particular individual was the one you see there in a mock drunk driving accident, and then 2 weeks later at the prom he's actually being arrested for driving under the influence. I think I've just got just a couple more. At the end of the day, you know, it's 21 and older, it's less than 21. The possibility of an $8 million party, we've seen the verdicts, they are out there. These, again, are just not numbers that we make up. And I don't know if the one that I have, if you go to the next one, okay, that's just our bio. But I was over on the vineyard back in June, and literally maybe about a week after I had a presentation like this, 2 young girls were coming home from a house party, and unfortunately on the vineyard they have bigger trees, and the trees are closer to the roadway than I understand they are here on Nantucket. And literally a week after I had a presentation like this, unfortunately in a drunk driving accident, a young girl was killed in a car crash. So, you know, it's across the water on the vineyard. It's just, you know, it's one of those, it's there, and I pray that it certainly doesn't ever happen over here to y'all. Before I take any questions, and if you have any, I'd love to answer any questions you have. I wasn't quite sure exactly when I was going to mention this, whether it was going to be in the beginning of the presentation or at the end of the presentation, but I came down today, and when I docked here at your harbor, it really took a lot to get off the boat, because the last time I was down here was November of 1982. And at that particular time, my very last football game was right across the way over here. I'm originally from Martha's Vineyard, and I wasn't sure if I should do that in the beginning because I didn't want to get booed off the stage. I mean, it's bad enough it's a lawyer, let alone a lawyer from the vineyard. So needless to say, you guys, for my 4 years in high school, I don't think we scored a point against the Nantucket Whalers. Of course, then in the 90s, I guess we were kicking your rear ends pretty good, but it's coming back. I think you guys have got a new coach. So one of the reasons for coming down to Nantucket was to actually get foot back on the island. And I must say, you do have an extremely beautiful island. I will even tell my friends from the vineyard that I was here, because my wife used to say, let's go to the Nantucket. I go, what are you, crazy? No way. I'm from the vineyard. I would never go over there, just like you guys may not go to the vineyard. But so I thank you for coming out tonight. I'm up for any questions that you may have. I will do my best to answer them. I know that the chief, if you've got criminal aspects, I would defer to the chief. But anything? Anyone? Bueller? Yes, ma'am.
Are there any legal ramifications of possessing a fake ID?
I'm sorry?
Possessing a fake ID, are there any legal ramifications of getting caught with a fake ID?
I would assume that, yeah, I mean, that was a criminal thing, but I would defer to the chief, but my first instinct was say there would be.
There is. That would, you can lose your, if you have a license, you can actually get your license suspended if you have a fake ID. And the person who gave you that fake ID, if it, for instance, a sister or brother or something like that, they could also have their license suspended. They are confiscated and they are sent into the registry. So, you know, the liquor stores about every week bring in a whole stack of fake IDs. Many of them are just that. They're fake. They're not real. They don't belong to a person. But every once in a while we find one that is, and those go to the registry, and then, you know, that person has a little trouble with their license from that point forward. Now I know what it was doing at town meeting.
Yes.
Are there legal ramifications, like if a child, if one of their friends was really drunk and they took them to the hospital? How does that work?
Legal, I guess it would depend on legal ramifications for whom? For what?
For anybody.
Okay. Okay.
And, you know, she's called me where she's sitting next to the bedside. And it also scares me because then it's my responsibility to call that parent to let them know that their daughter or son is in the hospital.
Right. I think from a legal standpoint, it would really depend on what the police wanted to do with that particular situation. For example, if it was a minor who sustained alcohol poisoning, well, the first question would be, where did that alcohol come from? If you're able to find out that it was Bill Smith who provided alcohol to this young lady, and you had enough evidence, then the police could do what they may need to do to bring criminal charges against the person who procured the alcohol, working with the district attorney down here, decided what particular criminal charges. Civilly, I can't think of any sort of ramifications for. I think you might be in more trouble if you do nothing. For example, I mean, you know, the question always becomes, well, I come home and there is, you know, I was gone and now there's a huge house party. And what do I do with these kids? Where, you know, what's my obligation to these drunk kids? You know, do I just want to get them out of the house because I don't want anything to do with them? You know, get them home. My advice would be one of two things. You call the parents and saying, I've got Johnny right here, you need to come get him. Well, what if the parents aren't home, or what if I don't know, you know? I would call the Nantucket police and I go, I've got 4 intoxicated teenagers at my house. Because once you come home and recognize that they have been drinking, and then you decide, as we saw in Illinois, get out of the house, and they go and do something to themselves or to somebody's property or another pedestrian, and it starts to work itself back, as I mentioned, plaintiff's attorneys will try to find anybody along that stream. And if you were there and you almost kind of assume a duty to these children once you kind of recognize that they have been drinking. And so that's kind of oftentimes what we get, what should we do? Parents 1, police 2. The question sometimes, and I forgot to mention this, let's say you're at home with your 17-year-old daughter and you're having dinner and you want to have a glass of wine, or your 17-year-old wants to have a glass of wine. That's fine. That's not a violation of the social host liability statute. It carves out an exception for your own child in your own home. However, if your 17-year-old daughter has a 17-year-old friend in your home for the same dinner, it is a violation of the social host liability statute to give it to your daughter's friend, just for your information. So, yes, ma'am. We do. We kind of try to tweak it, you know, because I mean, sometimes, and again, I see a couple students here, you know, when you talk to them about homeowners insurance policy and $8.6 million verdicts, that goes a little bit above. They're like, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have $8.6 million. But we try to craft it a little bit more with the especially the athletics, the applications for various schools, and yeah, we do have one that we work with students on. Yeah.
We'll do something before prom.
Ooh, maybe we'll have to come back when it's warm again.
There you go.
Bummer.
Let me add to what he just said. We, a couple of years ago, started a new program or process of how we deal with the kids when we come across them out there at a lot of these parties. And some of you may know, when you've gotten that call at 2 in the morning to come out to some rural area of the island to pick your kid up, we no longer let them drive home or drive away from there. What we will do, a lot of times what happens, we pull in and they see us coming, and the biggest thing that's hurt us is the instant messaging and all that on the cell phones today. As soon as they see a cruiser coming, it's out like a wildfire. Or if there's a cruiser already there before they get there, you know, the party moves. So staying on top of that technology has been a real challenge for us. But what happens is when we go there, we stop these cars coming out of these areas, and if there's alcohol or the odor of alcohol present, none of those people drive any further from that point. They either somebody gets arrested or the parents get called to come pick them up there, or both. If there's no alcohol present in the car, if nobody, and we don't smell the odor of alcohol, we may let them proceed at that point. But generally what they're supposed to do, if we have enough officers to do it and enough, not too many people there, is they're supposed to at least have the kid call home and say, "Mom, I'm standing here with the police. They're going to let me come home, but they want to talk to you." And it's been very successful. Rarely do we call the same parent twice to come out and find their child, or rarely do we make that phone call to the home more than once.
We want to be sensitive to everyone's time. We do appreciate that you came out this evening. We said we would end around 8 o'clock. I'd like to introduce, to conclude the program, Amber Quintella, the president of the ASAP Board of Directors. One very important thing before Amber comes up: the card that you received this evening will be what your student will use to obtain tickets to prom or ball. So please keep that, and when they go to purchase those tickets, they'll turn that in at the main office to purchase their tickets. Amber.
I just first and foremost want to thank you all for being here, and just to keep in mind that it is never legal or responsible to serve anyone under the age of 21. Just that simple. We really believe that prevention is the best medicine. Thank you, Mark, for a wonderful presentation. Thank you to all of our co-sponsors. And I just want to say that in addition to prevention, we do try and do some healthy alternatives for our children here. And so if any of you would like to become more involved, whether it's just volunteering one night or learning more about our board, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Yes. Oh, your evaluation too. Thank you. If you could fill that out. Thanks.